I have owned Stardew Valley on Steam since 2021, but I never really played it until now. My brother gifted it to me on Steam so that the two of us could play multiplayer together. But when we played, I really was just a farmhand helping him with his farm, and didn't really get to appreciate this game for all that it is on my own. Recently, I've been seeing a lot of Stardew Valley content recommended to me on YouTube, probably due to the relatively recent 1.6 update, so I decided that now would be the perfect time to give this game another chance. And I'm sure glad that I did. This video is the story of my first spring season in Stardew Valley. The first thing I did was begin to clear the area outside the farmhouse in order to set up my first plot of parsnips. After I finished planting and watering all of my first crop of parsnips, I decided to head into town for the first time. I stopped by the general store and spent half of the money that I started with on some potato seeds to add to the farm. After that, I walked around town for a bit where I met Penny, and then I didn't know what to do, so I walked back into the general store to see if I could meet anybody else there. While I was there, I met Leah, Caroline, and Abigail. Then I went back outside and met Granny Evelyn for the first time. Having met some people in town, I returned to the farm and planted the potato seeds that I bought from the general store. After watering the potatoes, I got to work clearing out some of the area surrounding my farm plot. I also planted the one mixed seed that I found while doing so. After all of that, it was about 7 p.m., so I headed inside to sleep and end my first day in Stardew Valley. I woke up the morning of day 2 and checked the mail to find a letter from Willie the fisherman. After I finished watering the crops, I headed through town into the coast so that I could meet with Willie to see what he wanted. After getting Willie's old fishing rod, I decided to test it out immediately on the pier and see what I could catch. Before long, I caught my first fish, a 1-inch long sardine. I spent most of the rest of the day catching fish on the pier and immediately selling them to Willie in his shop. On the way back, I also met Elliot on the beach. While I was passing through town, I decided to stop by the Stardew saloon to see who I could find in there. Unlike most of the people I had met so far, Shane was not so happy to see me. After visiting the saloon, I headed home to hit the sack and end my second day in Stardew Valley. Good news was I had done enough fishing the first day to already level up my fishing skill 1 level. The morning of day 3, I woke up to find my first rainy day. With no need to water the crops, I headed into town, where I found Shane again, still not very happy to see me. I spent some time fishing in the river, and then went down to Willie's to sell the fish that I caught. I also did a little bit of fishing in the ocean, where I caught a treasure chest that happened to have my first iron of the entire playthrough. On my way back through town, I stopped by the saloon again, where I chatted with Leah and Pam. After that, I headed back to the farmhouse to go to sleep and end day 3. The morning of day 4, I made a chest to hold my excess stuff, watered the plants, and then headed into town. I spent pretty much all of day 4 fishing to make money to buy more seeds. All that fishing not only made me some money, but also got me enough XP to level my fishing skill another time. The morning of day 5, I woke up and headed outside to find a nice surprise. Marnie had found a stray dog looking for a home that I was glad to take in. I went with the default name of Yogi, as it seemed a fitting name for the dog that showed up. There also was a letter in the mail from Jojamart telling us that the landside had been cleared and access to the mines was restored. I harvested my first crop of parsnips, dropped them in the bin, and then headed into town. While waiting for the stores to open, I caught a treasure chest in the river that happened to have an earth crystal in it. Once it hit 9 o'clock, I headed into the general store where I bought a bunch of potato seeds to plant. Afterwards, I was walking through town where I ran into Jody, who revealed the sad reality of Jojamart. Even though she knows it's not the healthiest, she feels pressure to shop there for financial stability. After that, I went to the museum where I met Gunther for the first time and made my first donation to the museum. After I made my donation to the museum, I started heading back to the farm through another route that I hadn't gone through yet, where I ran into Leah along the way. It was around this point that I decided Leah would make the best romantic partner for my Farmer George character, so I decided to give her a gift to begin building our relationship. After that, I headed back to the farm where I planted what potatoes I bought from the general store earlier and got ready for bed. I also finally got enough XP to level up farming for the first time and unlock scarecrows, something that I should have used as soon as I unlocked it, but that was a lesson I wouldn't learn until later. I began day 6 watering the crops, and then headed down south to fish in the river by Leah's house. I thought it was funny that Willie spends his Saturdays fishing in the river when he spends his whole week fishing in the ocean. After checking the help wanted sign, I wish I had given Leah something else as a gift rather than the earth crystal. I checked the wiki and found that one of Leah's loved gifts is a salad, so I decided to buy one from the saloon and give that to her. A lot of people might see the gift of a salad as a not-so-subtle message, but Leah doesn't seem to care, so good for her. After giving her her gift, I headed back to the farmhouse and went to bed early for the night. I began day 7 plucking the potatoes that had already grown, and then did a little fishing in town while I waited for the store to open again. After selling the first few potatoes that had grown, I was finally able to purchase the backpack upgrade. I spent the remainder of my gold on some more parsnip seeds. I went straight back to the farm, planted and watered those parsnip seeds, and then went pretty much immediately to bed around 1 p.m. That was the end of my first week in Stardew Valley, and I felt like things were going pretty good so far. On the morning of day 8, I went outside to water the crops and picked a couple of parsnips that had grown in my little side garden, and then headed to the mines for the first time during this playthrough. After meeting Marlin and getting my hands on the rusty sword, I made my first trip down into the mines where I made it down to the 5th level before heading back. After my mining trip, I went back down to the river by Leah's cottage where I was doing some fishing when I caught her on her way back to her house. No pun intended. During our chat, Leah asked me why I became a farmer, to which I answered to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. After that, I returned back home to go to sleep and end day 8. I was able on my first day in the mines to level up my mining skill. On the morning of day 9, Clint showed up to my house to give me the blueprints to build a furnace of my own. After quickly watering the plants, I decided to make a furnace so that I could start smelting things immediately. Not much else happened that day except for a little bit of fishing, so after that I returned home and went to bed around 9 p.m. The day's worth of fishing was enough to get up to level 3 though. The morning of day 10, I checked the mail to find a letter from Robin apologizing for making jokes about the cottage and letting me know that she would be able to upgrade it in the future. During my morning fishing routine, I caught a chest that included some topaz, which was my first time finding that mineral. In town, I checked the help wanted sign where I found that Elliot needed some quartz. I knew that I already had some quartz back home in my chest, so after grabbing that, I returned to town where I was met by Mayor Lewis introducing me to the community center. After talking with Lewis about the community center, I stopped by the museum to drop off the topaz that I found fishing earlier, and then headed to the beach to give the quartz to Elliot. After completing my delivery to Elliot, I went to do some more fishing. I was mostly waiting until Leah got back home so that I could give her a gift. After all, what could be more romantic than waiting outside somebody's home at night until they return so you can give them a salad? Of course, Leah seems to be unbothered by it. Once I got home, I realized I forgot to water the plants that morning, so I did it before bed. The morning of day 11, I checked the mail to find a letter from the wizard, which I promptly ignored and completely forgot about for the rest of this video. I'll get around to fixing the community center eventually. I harvested my parsnips and then headed into town where I bought my first cauliflower seeds. I spent most of the rest of the day on the farm, planting and watering the cauliflower seeds, as well as doing a little bit of smelting with the furnace. That night, I leveled up both my farming and my fishing by 1 level. The morning of day 12, I checked the mail where I had a letter from Mayor Lewis telling me about the egg festival that was going to be the next day. After watering the plants, I headed into town where I did a little bit of fishing and happened to catch a chest that included some rice. While I was in the area, I stopped by the museum to drop off the quartz, and then returned to the farm to plant the rice that I found. I also spent the rest of my gold on cauliflower seeds. After planting and watering the seeds, I decided to head into town since it was a Friday night to see what was happening at the saloon. After chatting with most of the people in there, I returned home and went to bed late. The morning of day 13, I went to check the mail to find that my mother had sent me a letter and my favorite cookies. How wholesome. I ate the cookies for breakfast and then got to work watering the crops. When I was heading into town, I had honestly forgotten that today was the egg festival. I went around chatting with everybody until I decided to start the egg hunt. During the egg hunt, I was able to find 6 eggs in total, but unfortunately that was not enough to win, and I ended up losing to Abigail. The conclusion of the egg festival skips straight to the end of the day, in which I went straight to bed. Day 14 was yet another rainy day, but unfortunately, once I went outside, I found a crow eating my crops. I should have placed a scarecrow there beforehand, but you live and you learn. While I was in town, I grabbed some more cauliflower seeds and planted them back at the farm, and then headed down south to do some more fishing. After that, I returned home, got a cozy fire going, and went to bed. On the morning of day 15, I went outside and checked the mail to see that Granny Evelyn sent me a letter warning me about how some crops only grow in certain seasons. I quickly watered the crops and then headed into town where I checked the Help Wanted board and saw that Penny needed a herring for a casserole. I figured that'd be easy enough, so I went down to the pier to catch a herring for Penny. After that, I went to the forest to harvest some salmon berries, and when I ran into Leah, handed her another salad as a gift. Not too long after that, I headed home and went to bed for the night. On day 16, I found that Pierre had written me a letter letting me know that he had just put fertilizer in stock, and then I went to go water the crops, and then headed back down south to do some more fishing again. While I was down there, I also gifted Leah another salad. Other than that, I just returned home and decided to go to bed early on the 16th. The 17th was yet another rainy day, so I decided to spend it in the mines. While I was down there, I found a new dagger in a chest, but it didn't end up being that great. Once I made it down to level 10, I grabbed the leather boots and then headed back up to the surface. Back at the farm, I did a little bit of smelting and then headed to bed. On the morning of day 18, I went out and watered the crops, and then headed into town where I got some geodes that I found in the mines the day before broken down. I then headed over to Pierre's just in time to see Joja Mart come in and steal all of his customers. After that incident, I spent most of the rest of the day fishing down south. Close to 11 o'clock, I headed back to the cabin and went to sleep. The morning of the 19th, I checked my mail to see that Jody had requested a fresh cauliflower from me. Thankfully, I had plenty of cauliflower almost ready. After watering the crops, I did a few miscellaneous things around the farm and then just headed in for the night. Day 20 was yet another rainy day, so I decided once again to spend it in the mines. I made it down to floor 13 before I got completely swarmed with monsters and had to flee. After fleeing from the mines, I headed by the museum to donate something and reached my first full reward from donating to the museum. Unfortunately, it ended up being cauliflower seeds, which I didn't have enough time left in this spring to grow, so I'll just have to save them until next year. I made it home around 6 o'clock and turned in early for the night. I also got to level 5 fishing skill, which allowed me to pick fisher as my profession. I went out on day 21 and watered the crops before heading back to the mines once again. This time I was able to make it down to floor 15 and then took the elevator back up. I did a few other miscellaneous things around the farm and then went to bed around 9:30. On the morning of day 22, I watered the crops before heading down towards Leah's cottage to visit her while she was working on her sculpture. After telling me about the layers of her sculpture, I responded by saying that it's a similar concept with people. Leah was honest with me that it can be difficult to pay the bills as an artist, so I recommended she have an art show in town. After visiting Leah's house, I did a few more miscellaneous tasks and then headed to go to bed early that night. The morning of day 23, I checked my mail to see that there would be a flower dance in the forest tomorrow. I harvested the crops that were ready, watered the rest, and then headed back down to the river to do some more fishing. After all that, I headed back and went to sleep around 9:40 p.m. The crops that I harvested that day did level me up to level 3 farming. I began day 24 harvesting a big chunk of the remaining cauliflower that was now done, and then I did some fishing while I waited for the flower dance to start. Upon arriving at the flower festival, I took some time to chat with each of the NPCs while I was there before beginning the dance. After the dance was done, I went home and went to bed for the evening, ending day 24. The cauliflower I picked earlier did end up pushing me over to farming level 4. Not much ended up happening on day 25. I quickly watered the cauliflower plants that were still left, did a little bit of fishing and some shopping in town, and then went straight to bed. On day 26, I checked the mail and was pleasantly surprised to find 500 gold from Grandpa in there. I finished harvesting the remaining cauliflower and then began to make a path from the farm plot down to the southern entrance of the farm. After finishing the path, I went back down towards Leah's cottage to visit her once again. After hearing her story, I assured her that she did the right thing in leaving her boyfriend. After I visited Leah, I spent some time fishing with Willie. Close to 2:30 in the afternoon, I headed back and called it early for the day. With no crops left in this rotation, I spent most of the final day of spring fishing before eventually heading back to call it early for the final day. And with that, spring was over and summer had begun, and I had finished my first season of Stardew Valley. I want to thank you all for watching and say that if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. And if you'd like to see more Stardew Valley content in the future, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, if you have any tips for a newbie at Stardew Valley, please leave them below in the comments, as I am definitely still learning this game. Thank you all again, and I hope to see you in the next one.